Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, first of all, I must apologize because of my voice. It was broken yesterday. But in any case, at the beginning, I would like to say it's a really great honor and a privilege to speak in front of you here in Berlin, celebrating 30th anniversary of Fall of the Wall. In the year 1990, 1 year after the fall of the wall, an artwork was made in the East Side Germany in Berlin, saying, "Many small people who in many small places do many small things can alter the face of the world." And they achieved that because now the symbol of the Cold War, the beginning of the end of the Iron Curtain, the symbol of Europe divided, was not longer standing. It is not the wall itself with its physical border that shocked the world, but the very meaning of the barrier and the horrors it bore for 28 years to the people of Germany, to the people of Berlin. Almost 150 kilometers long concrete construction kept the people of East and West Germany completely divided, allowing no communications or passing the barrier that signified so much more than the mere border as it was presented. It signified a political game, a mere illusion of world's unification, an attempt to show the world the power of the two blocks. However, it has always been, throughout history, the people bore the great burden, once inhabiting one city, starving for further growth and development of the weakened country, striving for peace and unity. The people of Berlin found themselves as the victims amid a political clash of titans. Interestingly enough, Rijeka, the city in Croatia I come from, experienced a similar political destiny. As a city that throughout its history went through 7 historical political regimes in only 90 years, Rijeka was always considered a different city, a city that enjoyed its autonomy for centuries, first within the Habsburg Empire, later turned into a dual monarchy, upon which Rijeka continued his autonomy as the free royal port under the Hungarian administration. Through the history, one short period of 3 years, Rijeka was even a state known as the Free State of Rijeka. With the collapse of Austro-Hungarian monarchy at the end of First World War, some 40 years before the Berlin Wall, Rijeka found itself in the between of conflict of countries that later on ended with the same barrier that divided Berlin, the same border that divided Europe and the world in 60s. In the year 1919, Rijeka, with its great part of population being Italian, found itself at the feet of the Italian poet and writer Gabriele D'Annunzio. Born and raised in Pescara, the so-called poet, in fact a predecessor of the fascist ideology, entered the city of Rijeka with one aim only, making the city purely Italian and completely ridden of Croatian population. In September 12, 1990, D'Annunzio lifted the occupation of Rijeka, terrorizing Croatian population, dividing the people of the city, claiming, contrary to all governmental and world forces positions at that time, that Rijeka should in fact be Italian and only Italian. Times that followed revealed the full dreadfulness of fascism, leaving Rijeka, the city of D'Annunzio called his martyr, completely profaned and scavenged. D'Annunzio's occupation of the city led to the day known in Rijeka's history as a Bloody Christmas. In December 24th of 1920, The people of Rijeka resist, and the rebellion, helped by official Italian army, led to bloody conflict that result in many losses from both sides, finally leaving Rijeka free of the Nuncio reign. However, this psychological barrier in Rijeka that D'Annunzio created, dividing the population, accepting the existence of Italian population only, signified laying in the foundation of the part of the history which led to the beginning of construction of the wall in Rijeka that followed a few years later. With the Treaty of Rome between the Kingdom of Italy and Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovens, later known as Kingdom of Yugoslavia, in the year 1924, Italy was granted the annexion of Rijeka, thus making the west area of the city an official part of the Kingdom of Italy. Events that later followed were merely recognized as fortification of the Italian part of the city, actually signifying the start of the construction of the border in the middle of the city. The white and red colored lines on the roads were replaced with the 40 centimeters wide and 1.5 meters high concrete wall, dividing the population of Rijeka for the next 20 years. Finally, the wall in Rijeka was demolished during the Second World War, at the end, with the fascist forces liberating the city, making Rijeka finally a unified city. So, as I mentioned earlier, it's not the wall itself with its physical border that signifies the dreadful times, but the very meaning of the barrier and the horrors it bears to the city and its people. Both Berlin and Rijeka experience the brutal fate of its walls, imposed and forced barriers in the history of both our cities and nations. These walls and the demolition of the barriers become a great part of our identity. Both Berlin and Rijeka become modern cities, defying oppressions of any kind, deprivation of human rights, encouraging freedom of choice and opinion, striving to spread tolerance, peace, and freedom, implementing the basic principle of anti-fascism, the principle integrated deeply within the old continent of Europe. Those are the values that in fact led my city to the title of European Capital of Culture in 2020, that means next year. Rijeka was not ashamed of the controversial part of its past. We simply embraced them. We had strong industry, workforce, dictatorships, and regimes. We did not simply forget them. We learned from them, becoming stronger and unique. Of what society would proclaim as disadvantage, we modeled into our advantages, creating a program titled in the way that perhaps described Rijeka in the best possible way, Port of Diversity. The same values and foundations we find in Berlin today. The same spirit and freedom led both Berlin and Rijeka towards the better tomorrow, creating modern European city recognized as open, multi-ethnic, and multicultural. However, standing here today with no walls dividing us, we must ask ourselves, what of the walls that divide us today? They may not be made of concrete material, but they most certainly exist, hide, and seemingly impossible to demolish or cross. Even without actual walls dividing us all, containing us within imposed borders, we find ourselves in time where we in fact construct our own walls. Walls between people, walls between nations, walls between basic human rights, walls between freedom of any kinds. We find ourselves in front of the walls that border ethnical values and morality, where ethical values are simply an item of trade and actual disputes are made about basic and principal human rights, freedom of choice, and freedom of way we live our lives. We find ourselves in front of the wall bordering women's right to equality. We find ourselves bordering the ones seeking salvation from war-destroyed countries. So, as we stand here today, marking this historical event of great importance, celebrating the fall of the wall that signified the unification of the Europe, we must not forget that was not the only wall dividing one city. That was not the only wall dividing nations and countries. It was not the only wall dividing Europe. It is upon us to continue the fight, to continue demolishing the walls between us and in front of us, to preserve the values which signify the very basis of our cities, nations, countries, and Europe. We must continue to exact values of those small people that did many small things and finally altered the face of the world, which society often forgets. It is our obligation and our duty to let those values, those people fall into oblivion. That is a wall we simply must not allow to stand. These are the values of my cities reside on, and I am convinced those are the values Berlin resides on. The very foundation was based our past on, the foundation we live by in the present, and the foundation that strongly lead us into the future. The foundation leading our city were in fact left in our legacy long ago, becoming the way of life we live with pride today, representing the wall of our past we choose to demolish and cross. And it is the very same legacy we have the obligation to preserve, cherish, and develop in the modern world. Those are the values we have to pass along the future generation so they would perceive the meaning of the walls between cities and nations and to cherish the true significance of the freedom. Finally, I will conclude inspired by the words of Ronald Reagan spoken right here in Berlin. Yes, across Europe, this wall will fall, for it cannot withstand fate, it cannot withstand truth. You see, it is upon us all to ensure that the wall, whatever barrier it may present today, it simply must not withstand freedom. Thank you for your attention.